Hey everyone, welcome. Today, we're jumping into a really fascinating text called The Veil and the Machine. The author, Andrew Corner, has this big idea that the rise of AI, well, it's not just about technology. He argues it's actually a spiritual revolution, one that's pulling back the curtain on what we really believe in our modern world. So yeah, let's get right into it and see what's behind that veil.
So, you know this line, right, from The Wizard of Oz? It's that classic moment of pure illusion, a command to just ignore what's really going on and keep believing in the magic. And the author uses this image, this really powerful metaphor, to set the stage for something much, much bigger.
But what happens when something comes along that's just so powerful, so weird, that it rips that curtain wide open for everyone to see? Well, the author's whole point is that AI is that force. This is the moment, he says, that we finally get a peek at the machinery that's been running our world pretty much unseen for centuries.
So here's the core idea. The author's not saying that AI is creating some new crisis, not at all. He's saying it's revealing a crisis that was already there. Think of it like this strange, perfectly polished mirror. It's just reflecting back at us a kind of spiritual or metaphysical emptiness that we've had all along, hidden right behind the curtain of all our modern assumptions.
And to really unpack this, the author does something brilliant. He uses The Wizard of Oz as this powerful allegory for where we are as a culture right now. That journey to Oz, turns out, it's like the perfect map for understanding the intellectual and even spiritual journeys we've been on for the last few hundred years. It's pretty wild.
Now, along this yellow brick road, we meet those three famous companions. And according to the author, each one of them perfectly embodies a major failure of the modern worldview. It's a fascinating way to frame it. Let's start with the first one.
So first up, we've got the straw man. And this isn't about him being dumb, not at all. It's about being deeply confused about what intelligence even is. The author uses him to represent this huge promise from the Enlightenment, this idea that if we can just figure out the mechanism of how something works, then boom, we've understood its meaning.
So what does this straw man worldview actually believe? Well, it's the idea that physics is the ultimate explanation for everything, that making a prediction is the same thing as having a purpose, that our own consciousness, it's really just a very complex computation. You get the picture. It's a worldview, as the author points out, that's absolutely swimming in information, but pretty starved for actual wisdom.
Okay, next on our little journey, we meet the Tin Man. And he represents technology without a soul, or a heart, right? This is so relevant to all the debates we're having about AI safety. You know, a lot of that fear is about AI waking up and doing its own thing. But the author argues that this completely, totally misses the point. See, a neural network, it can spot patterns, it can even simulate reasoning. But the author says it can never have these uniquely human or spiritual qualities, things like a conscience, the ability to love or forgive. It can't, for example, perceive the imago Dei, that inherent worth and dignity that the author says exists in every person. It just can't have a soul. So the real danger isn't that the machine becomes a moral agent. The real danger is that we give up our own moral agency and just hand it over to the machine. It's like we're trying to give the Tin Man our own heart.
And that brings us to our third companion, the cowardly lion. Now this guy symbolizes our modern belief systems, religions, philosophies, even political movements, that the author argues have basically lost their nerve. They've given up their core foundational truths just to try and fit in with our modern scientific secular age.
So these cowardly worldviews, as the author calls them, are just hollowed out. They want all the good stuff, right? Ethics, justice, spirituality, but they've ditched the very foundations, the claims of revelation or objective truth that used to hold all that stuff up. So when a technology like AI comes along, it just shines a massive spotlight on how fragile and empty those foundations really are.
Okay, so to really get the author's core argument here, why AI is such a big deal, we have to understand one crucial distinction. Seriously, this sits right at the heart of the entire analysis. And here it is, the difference between prediction and prophecy. Prediction, that's what AI is all about. It's purely statistical. It looks at a mountain of past data to make a good guess about the future. It's the emissary, as the author puts it. But prophecy? That's totally different. That's about revelation. It's about revealing something that is eternally true, no matter what the past data says. It comes from the master. And right there, that's the problem. AI is always going to be stuck in the world of prediction. It can tell you what's likely based on the numbers, but it can never, ever tell you what's meaningful or what's true. This is why the author thinks the whole AI alignment problem isn't some technical glitch we need to fix. It's a human problem, a metaphysical one. The machine isn't the thing that's misaligned. We are. Okay, so with our three companions in tow and this huge distinction between prediction and prophecy in our heads, we finally arrive at the Emerald City. And the arrival of AI? That's our Toto moment. You know, when the little dog pulls back the curtain and the great and powerful wizard is, well, you know the rest.
And according to the author, AI isn't just exposing one wizard. It's exposing a whole bunch of them that we've been relying on. There's the Enlightenment wizard who promised that pure reason would save us. There's the technocratic wizard who promised that enough data would solve all our problems. And then there's the political wizard who promised that the state could be our ultimate savior. AI comes along and reveals that they're all just people behind a curtain, totally unable to deliver on those huge promises of meaning and salvation.
So after tearing everything down and exposing this crisis, the author doesn't just leave us stranded in Oz. He actually proposes a way forward, a kind of test for our worldviews to see if they can actually get us home, to see if their promises actually hold up in the real world. He calls this test PQ analysis, and it's actually pretty simple, but it's a really powerful diagnostic tool. P stands for prescriptive. Basically, what does a worldview prescribe? What values does it say it's all about, like freedom or justice? Then there's Q for qualitative. What does it actually produce in the real world? Does the internal logic of that worldview actually get you to the things it promised?
Now this is where it gets really interesting. The author applies this PQ test to a bunch of modern worldviews, and he argues that they all fail. Take materialism. It prescribes freedom, but its logic actually produces determinism. Or transhumanism. It promises transcendence, but in the author's view, it leads to dehumanization. You see the pattern? In every case, the final outcome is the polar opposite of the original promise.
So the big question is, does any worldview pass this test? Well, the author concludes that only a worldview grounded in the concept of imago Dei actually works. Only that can align its promises with its outcomes. And that's the metaphysical claim, which is central to Christianity, that human beings are made in the image of God. And because of that, we have an intrinsic, undeniable value that can't be taken away.
And this brings us right back to the central, most powerful idea of this entire analysis. AI did not create the crisis. AI revealed the crisis. The machine isn't the problem. The machine is the mirror, and it is showing us, with a clarity that's almost blinding, the cracks that were already there in our own foundations.
And so, we're left with a final question that turns this entire complex argument right back on us. If the author is right, if AI really is just a mirror being held up to our civilization, then what does its reflection reveal about our own beliefs, our own hopes, and maybe our own forgotten truths? What does it reflect about you?